All right. Welcome, everyone. We've got about 49 people online, and we are good to go for the third class of our of the Learn to Hunt Deer online class. It doesn't matter if you're adults or kids or any age. My name is James Burnham. I'm the R3 coordinator. Today, we're going to be talking about rules and regs and considerations when hunting for food. And let's get started. We got a lot of ground to cover. Rules and regs is pretty thick. And I'm skipping ahead. Come on, computer. All right. Okay. So we're gonna really quick. This is the class 3. We're gonna go over who we are. The folks that are taking this, they're all over the place. Around the world. We've had folks from New Zealand. We've had folks from Finland. So, yeah, it's been pretty great. We're gonna go a little bit over the webinar housekeeping, and then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes. As always, our goal here is for you to learn about deer hunting, the rules and best practices to participate in a safe and ethical deer hunt this fall. Again, my name is James Burnham. I'm the Recruitment, Retention, and Reactivation Coordinator for the state of Minnesota. Basically, that means my job is to get more people out hunting and fishing. And I'll let Craig introduce himself, and then we'll get to our guest.
I'm Craig Kiger. I've been with DNR for 15 years, and I teach shooting sports.
Fantastic. And our guest today, so every class we're having guest speakers help us out with this. They're taking time out of their day to help us out. And today we kind of have a little bit of a rock star. We've got Kelsey Lashar with us. She's with the Wildlife Health Program here at DNR. As well as being a Learn to Hunt alumna, someone who's done our Learn to Hunt program as well. So Kelsey, why don't you introduce yourself to the good folks?
Thanks for having me here today, James. Yes, so I'm with Minnesota Department of Natural Resources as a member of the Wildlife Health Program. So basically, we work with anything that's dead, sick, or dying. This includes moose, deer, grouse, ducks, what have you. Just as a caveat, I am not Department of Health and I'm not Department of Ag. So if you have, very specific questions about some of the stuff that I cover in regards to like human health, please reach out to Department of Health to help you with some of those questions. Basically, I help with diseases that are affecting large populations, not necessarily like if an animal gets, a broken leg. We're more talking about like large population stuff. I did participate in the Learn to Hunt program 2 years ago. I did not get a deer while I was with them, but I did get one later that season. But being out in the field with some of the mentors was absolutely invaluable. I loved my time in the education and just the experiences that they gave me. So today I'll be talking a little bit about chronic wasting disease, which affects deer in our state, as well as some other diseases that may come up or you may be curious about in regards to eating venison.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kelsey. And if I recall correctly, you could have had a shot on that Learn to Hunt, correct?
I don't think so.
No, I thought you had about 3 or 4 of them come trotting by your blind.
They did, but they were real fast. Not anything I would have wanted to take a good shot at. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. So just a couple more. This is, if you've been on the webinar so far, it's the same slide. But if you haven't been, just a real quick housekeeping note. This webinar series is intended to give you an overview of what's required to go deer hunting in Minnesota. It's very Minnesota specific. It's going to give you a little bit of deer ecology and hunting history in Minnesota, as well as the rules and regs and some of the gear and equipment. It gives you a chance to hear a variety of voices that, like Kelsey's. Last week we had 2 wonderful guests with Azalea and Claire, and those voices are going to range from brand new hunters all the way up to people that have been doing this their whole life. It's a chance for you to ask questions about deer hunting. And I would, again, stress that, you know, take advantage of the guest speakers while we have them here. You know, they're not going to be on all the calls. Craig and I are going to be on all the calls. So we're always going to be here, but those guests, this is your one chance to get Kelsey's feedback on her experience and her hunting perspective. And it's really kind of a shortcut to get you on the right path towards deer hunting in Minnesota. It's not an open forum for you to bombard folks with questions about hyper-specific hypothetical situations or scenarios. You know, it's not the carte blanche to answer everything. It's also not a substitute for you spending time in the field or at the range, getting comfortable with where you're going to hunt and the gear and equipment that you're going to hunt with. So those are two really important components that this distance learning thing doesn't allow us to do. You know, one of the good things about these webinars is that it lets us get a chance to talk to people, a wide range of people, a lot of people at once, you know, people in Finland, people in New Zealand. But the trade-off is that we don't have the ability to have that hands-on instruction that you can get in our typical in-person programming. So that being said, let's get into the meat of the rules and the regulations. Now, if you've never gone hunting before and you're just starting out, the rules and the regulations can be intimidating. The rules and regs, they come in a booklet, and that booklet can be pretty intense. Now, I'm going to do something really quick. I'm going to stop this. Give me just a second. And I'm going to change how I'm doing this because I want to make sure that I'm doing it the correct way and I'm not getting the display that I want. So apologies. Thank you for standing by. The rules and the regulations, you know, they come in a booklet. And can everybody see my screen? Kelsey, give me a quick nod if you can see that. All right, great. They come in a booklet, and it's not exactly a small booklet. I mean, it's 122 pages. So it can be a little intimidating, and it has this map in it. It can be intimidating, and that's fine. That's not you. Don't be worried. Like, you're not the one. Like, it's not you. The rules are big and thick because we're covering the entire state. This is all hunting and trapping regulations. There are a lot of variabilities that are going into this stuff. You know, where it's all the rules moving forward. So that's why there's so much of it. It's a big state. There are a lot of complexities around the state. The populations of these animals are not evenly distributed across the state. So there are a lot of area-specific rules and regs and management decisions that get made so that hunters in the north can have a good experience, just like hunters in the south can have a good experience, and we can manage those populations for the conditions that are specific to that area. So, you know, the rules and the regulations can be complex, but it reflects the complexity that we're dealing with as a management agency on the ground, trying to manage a resource for the entirety, the geographic extent of the state, as well as the population of the state. The good news is if you're hunting deer, you don't need to know all 122 pages. You can just focus on the deer section, start there. That's where we're going to be starting, and that's what we're going to be dealing with today. So. And again, you know, you can download this information as a PDF. You can put it on your phone. It'll give you something to read while you're waiting for deer to come by. You can pick these rules books up, the rules and regs books up. Anywhere they sell licenses, they should have them. But if you want to download them, there's the link. You can just search for Minnesota hunting rules and regulations and get that information up and out and in your pocket. Digitally or physically. All right. So the deer rules and regulations in the booklet, you know, that 122-page booklet, they start on page 57 for generic rules for all big game. And that's deer, that's elk, that's bear. So those are the three big game species in Minnesota, and there's some consistent rules across all three of those. Deer specific regulations start on page 58. So it's kind of right in the center. The reason it's right in the center is because this map insert is right in the center, and we'll deal with this map in just a second. But that's right where people open up to. So in addition to the rules and regs book, the web page that we have, the hunting landing page that we have, is a tremendous source of knowledge and information. I highly recommend you check it out. We have a lot of staff that spend a lot of time putting great information together in one spot. Right up at the top, you've got news and notices. So if anything changes short notice, that's where that's going to be. We've got movement restriction information if you're interested in that. If you're hunting somewhere where CWD is an issue, and Kelsey is going to be talking about that very soon. And then we've got a great Q&A page, and we'll talk about that as well. There's also seasons, the permit areas, like basically everything you need to know. This is one-stop shopping for the rules and regs specific to deer. And again, if you just do a search for Minnesota deer hunting, you'll get there, but the website is there as well. Come on, computer. And so where to begin? And with this, I'm going to turn it over to Craig. Craig's going to take over. I'm going to be hanging out in the Q&A section. One more thing before I turn it over to Craig. Please, please, please focus your questions in the Q&A. It's a lot easier for us to navigate the Q&A window than it is the chat window. We can scroll through the Q&A a lot quicker and easier than we can in the chat. So Craig, go ahead and take it over and let me know when you need me to advance the slides.
Sure. So the state of Minnesota was divided into 3 major deer hunting zones: zone 100, 200, and 300. And you can find where you're probably going to hunt by looking on that large map. From that map, you can decide if you're going to be in a shotgun zone or a rifle zone, which would mean you'd have to use that specific equipment. And once you know which area you're going to hunt, then you can narrow it down to your deer permit area. Now, deer permit areas are a geographical spot within that larger zone area that we can manage the deer on a more local level and control the harvest based on that. So go ahead and advance the slide, James.
So really quickly, when you first get a license, they're going to want to know what series you're going to be hunting in. So you have a choice between hunting the A season, which is the standard early season, or a B season. Now, most of the folks that are on this call are new hunters. Go with the A season. It gives you the most time. It gives you the most geography to hunt. That B season is really a specialized hunt for the southeast part of the state.
Okay. So I mentioned the rifle shotgun boundary, and if you look close on that little map, you're going to see an orange line, and that's the dividing line. And the reason for that is in the open farm country south of that line, we want you to use a firearm that's going to shoot as far. A slug's accurate up to 100 yards, maybe a little bit more, and without a lot of forest down there to slow that down, a high power rifle would go 4 to 6 miles. So if you are hunting in that shotgun zone, it's illegal for you to use a muzzleloader during the shotgun season because it's a short range or shorter range firearm. And you can also hunt with a handgun. There's many different choices there. Excuse me. You'd want to spend a lot of time learning how to use that before you took your handgun out, and selecting a proper caliber. Used to be where 357, 41, 44 Magnums were your go-to cartridges. So north and east of that line, that's your rifle zone. And it has to be a center fire rifle of at least 220 caliber. Now, 220 doesn't exist in the cartridge world. So you'd be looking at a 223, a 22, 250, and they're pretty small. They're usually used for varmint size animals. We'd recommend a 243. because that's going to give you a better chance at harvesting that animal. And the next slide is going to show that orange line a little bit better for you. So it divides the state from east to west, and it's a little bit at an angle, but it follows that farm country. Go ahead, James. So we talked a little bit about the deer areas, and what the DNR does is we color code them so you can, at a glance, see what's going to be available for you to hunt in that area. And the white is bucks only, the blue is lottery, meaning that you apply usually in early September for an antlerless permit in the area that you're going to hunt in. And then there's a drawing, and those successful get notified, and you can go out and harvest an antlerless deer if that's what you choose to do. The other areas are hunter's choice, either a buck or a doe. Managed area are usually 1 buck and a doe or 2 does. Intensive harvest are 3 deer limit, and then some of the areas we have unlimited antlerless, where you can just go in and buy a tag, go out the next day and use that license. So if you buy it before sunrise on the day you hunt, the license is valid. If you buy it after sunrise, you have to wait until the next morning to go out. So if you do everything right, you could bag up to 5 deer. That's the state limit. And that's a lot of deer, you know. So we can go to the next slide there, James. You got something to add?
Yeah, just real quick. This map really shows, so these deer permit areas, they're really the fundamental unit for how the deer are managed across the state. And it gives you an idea of the complexity that we're talking about here. You know, northern Minnesota is not the same as southern Minnesota. You can see where those intensive harvest areas, those 3 deer limits, that lime green, you can see it kind of hits that diagonal kind of halfway through the state. Now remember, when we talked in that first class, we talked about where those ecological provinces are within Minnesota, and that's really that transition zone. So that's kind of, it's that sweet spot of deer habitat. So their numbers are going to be a lot higher there. That's really where there's a lot of deer to go around. And so, you know, not all permit areas are the same. You know, up in the deep north woods, there's not nearly as many deer up there. So they're trying to increase the herd size. So that's why you have that bucks only or that lottery designation. And in the south, in the farmland areas, you know, you've got a lot more deer on the landscape, and they're trying to manage for that. They're either trying to reduce their herd size or they're trying to keep it where it's at. Now, those unlimited antlerless areas around the metro, you know, they don't want a whole lot of deer where there's a whole lot of cars. And so, you know, making sure that the population is lower around the metro is typically a good thing for safety and health issues. And then in that southeast corner and the South Metro, and in that smack dab in the middle of the state there, those 600 units, those are the CWD units. And so, and Kelsey's going to talk about this in just a second, but that's also where they're trying to drive the population down quicker. You know, that they want to manage that herd a lot more intensively. So it is complex, it is confusing. Start with where you expect to go. So if you expect to go in a deer permit area in unit 157, you know you've got a 1 deer limit, and it can be either a buck or a doe. At this point, the lottery units, those deadlines were September 10th. So if you did not apply for a lottery, everything that's blue there, you can still hunt that area, but you're going to be restricted to just harvesting a buck at this point. So unless you submitted for the lottery and you got one of the options to harvest an antlerless, you know, right now all that blue is really bucks only. So but each, the buck, the lottery, and the hunter's choice, those all have one deer limits. So. All right, and all of this, again, this is part of that map that comes out of your regs books, and it unfolds, and I'm ripping it. But on one side, we've got the deer permit areas and where they're at in the rifle and shotgun zone. And on the other, we've got the deer permit areas and what their harvest designations are as well as other information. So, all right. Back to you, Craig.
Okay, you can go to the next slide.
Come on, PowerPoint. There we go.
So you can go on the DNR website and you can access the success from the previous years to see what kind of numbers were there. You can figure out how much public land is there by using a plat book and comparing the areas to see if you can.
Greg, you're breaking up on us, buddy. No. Craig, you there?
Hey, yeah, I can hear you. Hello?
Are you back?
I'm back.
Yeah, you're there. You're back. Okay.
Okay, good. So the deer permit areas, you can find out what kind of hunter success was the past few years, and you can use that to help plan where you want to go. Another map that works really well is a plat map, so you can find public land and ownership information on that area that you want to hunt. And that map on the DNR website is interactive, so you can click on it. It's going to give you a lot of additional information. When we tried this during rehearsal today, it was kind of slow. So do you still want to go there, James, or?
If we have time at the end, we'll hit that map.
Okay.
But for now, you can just do a search for interactive Minnesota deer permit map. Not only do they tell you what the designation is, how many deer you can pull out of there, but they have charts and graphs over, what the winter severity index has been in that area. They can provide detailed maps of what that area looks like. They can provide detailed harvest numbers. So there's really a lot of information coming out of that map. So it's a good idea to poke around, click different units, find an area that you think will work. A really clutch thing for a lot of new hunters, that map will also tell you how many acres of public land, or actually they have it in square miles. So how many square miles of public land there is to hunt in that unit. And that can inform your decision on whether you're going to go to that unit or not. So a really good tool to use. And if we have time at the end of this webinar, we'll get into it. Okay.
So is this mine or yours, James?
It's still you, buddy.
Okay. So when you buy your license, it's going to be printed on there for the series, the 100, 200, or 300 series where you want to hunt. It's going to tell you which type of equipment it's going to be good for, rifle, shotgun, or archery, or muzzleloader or archery. And so you got to look at it when you buy it, because that's the only chance you're going to get to make any changes. If you leave the store and come back, it's going to be too late. Sure, you look over your license and it's got all the information. There's two parts to it. The top part is your site tag, the bottom part is your license, and don't forget to sign that at the store before you leave. The top part is what you're going to punch out the information on. So it's got the days, it's got month, and AM or PM. So you're going to take your knife and cut a little triangle out of there and validate your license. You got to validate the license so that if you get stopped by the conservation officer, they can see what day you shot it on, what month you shot it in, and whether it was morning or afternoon. You have to attach that tag to the deer, and I like to use a zip tie. I usually poke a hole through the ear. If it's got a big enough rack, I can go around the rack or around the hock leg joint on the leg, and it has to be there. So it's just easier to do it as soon as you get the deer field dressed, put that tag on it, and drag it out of the woods. Anytime you use a mechanical means of getting your deer out, motorized mechanical means, you'd have to have that tag on, but it's just easier to put it on right up front and get it done. So bonus permits are independent of the type of equipment you're going to use. So if you're out bow hunting and you buy a bonus tag for your area, out in rifle hunt, if you haven't filled that bonus tag, you can still fill it with that rifle then. Remember, the only license and tag you need, if you're at bucks only, you got 1 deer limit. If you're lottery, you're still a 1 deer limit. And if you're hunter's choice, it's a 1 deer limit. But it's just bucks, buck or doe, and then the hunter's choice, buck or doe again. Bonus permits are for antlerless deer only. And you can get up to 2 in a managed, 3 in intensive harvest, and of course, unlimited antlerless. So I think I got all those, James.
Yeah. So and again, when you declare the area that you're going to hunt, you're not restricted to that area. So last year, I hunted in an area that was a lottery unit for the opening weekend, but I didn't have a lottery application in. So I was restricted to just a buck. Like I needed a buck to come in front of me if I was going to take a deer. That next weekend, I was actually hunting up at Craig's in Grand Rapids, and that was a hunter's choice. So I could have taken a buck or a doe if they had come by. They didn't, but if they had come by, I could have taken either one of them. Later in the season, I was hunting in southeastern Minnesota in an intensive management zone, and I had bonus tags with me. So, the way that you can do this is start with buying your license, know the main area you're going to be hunting. But if you're in an area that allows you to harvest 2 or 3 or unlimited, have those bonus tags, because that way, if an antlerless comes by, you can take it right away, and then you still have your main tag for another deer or a buck if they come by. So that's kind of the thought that goes behind some of this stuff, and you can hunt anywhere in the state as long as you stay within those seasons for the different series, for the 100, the 200, and the 300. So just keep in mind that stuff as you move forward. And Tony, I saw what you said in the chat. Hopefully that gets to the issues that you brought up. Craig, anything to add to that?
Nope.
Okay.
So what's a legal deer? State law says 3 inches of polished antler or more. So an easy rule of thumb is if it's longer than the ear, you've probably got a legal deer, unless something else is going on, super short ears or something. But so of course the D is going to be a definite legal buck, and I would say that C has a longer than his ear, and B has one longer than the ear. A is not a legal deer, and this is a spike buck. He's 2 7/8 inches long. I shot him with my bow, but had I shot him with my rifle, he wouldn't have been a antlered male. He would have been an antlerless male, and I would have had to have the right license to be able to harvest that deer. So you have to be really careful, because if it's less than 3 inches, that could be confiscation of your deer and maybe a fine to go along with it. Anything else you want on there?
Yeah, and it's really important. Kelsey raised the point, if you're not paying attention, you might think it's an antlerless deer because it doesn't have a giant obvious rack, and then you drop it and you get up to it and it's got an antler longer than 3 inches. Well, you just used your buck tag.
Yep.
So, be aware of what you're looking at. If you can't tell, if it's too hard to tell, let it go. It's not worth making a bad shot. It's not worth making a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And just be sure of what you're looking at. If you've got somebody with you, have them confirm if they've got binoculars or something. And that's one of the reasons I always take binoculars in the field, is I want to make sure that I know what I'm looking at, what I'm seeing, and making the best shot that I can make.
Okay, next one.
All right. So I'm going to wrap up with license and permits really quick. Like Craig said earlier, if you buy the license before shooting hours, then it's legal that day. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait. So if I come into an area and I bought my main license that gives me 1 deer, but I come into a bonus permit area, I drive into that bonus permit area, I stop at a store or a gas station, and I pick up a bonus tag. My main license is valid. That bonus tag is not valid until the following day. So just be aware of that as you're going through some of this stuff. These bonus and disease management permits, they give you the ability to harvest more than what that original main license gives you. And they tend to be very site specific. They tend to be restricted to a certain geographical area because they're trying to manage those deer populations and those deer herds at that unit area level. So just be aware of where you're at. Again, it all comes back to know where you're at, know what's on the map, know what the rules and regs are for that area, and move forward from there. So that's the best thing that you can do, is know where you're at, look at the map, and see what rules are applying there. Really quickly, other rules and regs, you can party hunt. And for people who have never hunted before, party hunting is when you go out as a group to take deer. And so that means if Craig and I are hunting and I've already used my buck tag because I got a nice fork horn buck, and I see a good buck come by and I know Craig hasn't used his, I can take that buck and then Craig will use his tag on that buck. So that's what party hunting means, is that you're out there as a group intending to hunt as a group. As long as you have the appropriate licenses or permits for that unit, you don't necessarily have to shoot that animal. Somebody else in your party can shoot it and then you can apply your tag to it. Party hunting is legal except when it's not. A lot of the special hunts, especially the special youth hunts, the youth deer season that's coming up, party hunting is not legal for that. You have to tag the animal that you take. You can't have somebody else bring in another tag and slap it on there for that hunter. And with a lot of the special hunts, the youth hunts in the parks, a lot of them are not, party hunting is not legal. The youth have to be the ones that take that shot. They have to be the ones to use that license. So just keep that in mind as you move forward. If you just want to go out and watch and see what this is all about, you don't need a license. You cannot do any assistance with the hunt until you know that animal is down and it's dead. So you can't carry a backpack, you can't help track blood, you can't do any of that stuff. You just have to go and observe. And once that animal is down and is dead, if they need help dragging it out, that's probably getting a little fuzzy, but that's legal. Baiting deer is illegal. Don't take a bag of corn chips out and dump it in front of your stand and use it to bring deer in closer. That is very much against the rules. And it gets back to that principles of fair chase that we talked about in the last class, where that's an unfair advantage over the animal for you. So baiting deer is illegal. Don't do it. Even if you're not the one doing it, if somebody else threw out a pile of corn and you come along and you're hunting there, and a CO comes along, they're not a conservation officer, they're not going to know who did it. So just be aware of your area. If you see that there's a bait pile there, leave. Call in the tip line, let people know, hey, somebody's scattering corn out here, and just get out of there, because it's not worth you trying to defend the, oh, I didn't know there was a giant pile of corn behind that hill mentality. Again, the frequently asked questions page is a great place to go. It's a great place to get a lot of questions answered. They break them down from general questions to licenses to the lottery to special hunts. It's a tremendous resource. So if you just Googled DNR deer FAQ, it should take you right there. But otherwise, the web link is there. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelsey. She's going to talk to us about CWD and other diseases and that consideration when hunting for food. Kelsey?
All right. So if you want to go ahead and pop on to the next slide. So today I'll be talking to you mostly about chronic wasting disease. Since we are in the state, we certainly love our acronyms. So I will be referring to this as CWD from here on forward. But chronic wasting disease is a neurological disease that's found in the deer family. So this affects everything from deer, elk, reindeer, caribou, and moose. It is always fatal. If an animal contracts this disease, it will not survive. Regardless of genetics, it is still going to die. There is no treatment for it. There's no vaccines. I have to take that, James. So can I hand it back over to you? You're muted.
Yep, I'm back on it.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have Kelsey on loan. She is currently um, helping out with the elk hunt that's going on up in northwestern Minnesota. So that may be an elk hunter calling in that she has to deal with. So yeah, so CWD it's always fatal. There's no treatment, there's no vaccine. Once a deer gets it, they've got about a 2-year period of incubation that can be anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, depending on how heavily they're inoculated with the prion. It is spread animal to animal, and so that's why in a lot of those areas in the southeast there's unlimited antlerless tags, because they're trying to drive down the density of the deer population. If those deer are coming into big cornfields or acorn lots and they're rubbing noses and they're licking each other, that's a much better chance for disease transmission to occur. And so we're really trying to drive down the deer density in those areas to try to mitigate the spread of that. Bucks are 3 times more likely to have the disease. Bucks spend a lot of time, especially in the pre-rut and rut that we talked about in the last class. They're fighting. They're all over each other. There's a big chance for them to spread that disease. They're also traveling a lot more than a lot of the does. There have been negative impacts on populations in Wisconsin, Colorado, and Wyoming. I lived in Wisconsin for 13 years before coming over here, and it's been impressive to see how the how CWD is affecting that. It's not completely wiping out the population, but where I hunt in Wisconsin, you definitely don't see those giant big bucks that you used to see, because the older they get, the more chance they have to pick up the disease, the more it's affecting that. So it really looks like both in Wisconsin, Colorado, and in Wyoming, you're seeing a shift in the demographics to younger deer, because the older deer are being affected by it. It stays in the environment for years. It's a really persistent and persnickety thing to get rid of. You can try to incinerate it. You can try to autoclave it, basically dissolve it in alkaline baths. There's some extreme disinfectants that will denature it, but freezing or cooking game meat will not destroy it. So a prion, for lack of a better description, a prion is a protein that is formed, folded differently, and that malformation is incredibly stable. So most of us know that when you cook meat, it turns brown. Those are those proteins that are denaturing. They're changing their configuration. They're changing how they chemically relate to other proteins in that meat structure. A prion will not denature. It won't unfold. It won't change its shape. It's extremely stable, and so it can persist in the soil. It can persist in through the cooking process, and it's still going to be there in that piece of meat, even if you cook it super, super well done and it's just basically shoe leather at that point. The prion's still going to be there. I got a text from Kelsey. She's dealing with a antler point restriction question, so she should be back on momentarily. Currently, CWD is found in 26 states, and it's also found in Norway, Sweden, and Finland. This thing really popped up on the landscape back in the 1960s in Colorado, and it's been spreading ever since. And so right now, we had the big hotspot happen next door in Wisconsin. I think their first case was 2002 or 2003, and they've been dealing with it ever since. And it's spread into northern Illinois. It's spread into Iowa, and it's spread into Minnesota. So there are populations that have been dealing with this for decades, but again, you're seeing the age structure of those populations shift and alter, and it's having an effect on things. How do we test for CWD? Well, they remove the lymph nodes in the neck. So, when you go to the doctor and they feel around your neck for swollen glands, they're feeling for those lymph nodes, and lymph nodes are part of the circulatory system that moves lymph through the body, and that lymph is part of the autoimmune response and the regular immune response. to help deal with infections. So you have these nodes that are these concentrations of lymph, and they produce the white blood cell. They help produce white blood cells that then go on to fight infection. So when the body's infected, that's where you get a lot of, you get swelling of the lymph nodes because they're operating at a higher level, and B, that's where you get concentrations of the pathogens that are affecting the body. So they'll go in, they'll cut open the neck of the deer, they'll remove the lymph nodes, and then they take a cross section of them and they send them to Colorado State, where people will stain them with a specific stain. So that prion, that malformed protein, when it encounters a specific type of chemical stain, it turns a different color. And so you can see it imaged on a microscope slide, and you can determine whether or not there is CWD in the animal. Right now, we have multiple CWD survey areas. We currently have had 88 deer test positive for CWD. The new areas are in the West Surveillance Area. Now, that's stemmed from a positive at a captive cervid operation. There's also a new Eastern Surveillance Area. So whenever there's a positive that comes up, especially at a captive operation, the DNR sets up a surveillance area around that operation to test to see whether that infection has jumped to the wild population. There's a new unit in the South Metro that is under heavy monitoring. There was a wild deer that tested positive for that in the winter of 2019, 2020. So they've set up a very big management area. So a management area is different from a surveillance area. The surveillance area is, there was a captive deer, it tested positive. We're going to be monitoring the area around it. A management area is, we've had a case in a wild deer. We need to manage this area to try to reduce the herd density and prevent that thing from spreading. We still have an ongoing southeast management area, a management zone down in the southeast. That's been the epicenter and the original hotspot for CWD in the state. And we have an area up in the north central as well that is ongoing. So those are the areas where CWD are hot. If you're hunting in a CWD area, please submit your deer for sampling. There are going to be self-service sampling stations in the CWD surveillance areas and zones for voluntary testing. There's dumpsters and quartering tripods available in those areas. Some of this is going to be in place for the archery season, but it's going to be expanded significantly during firearms. And so just be aware of where those things are, and you can go online and find out more information about that on our CWD website. There's a lot of information on the DNR website, and if you just do a search for MN DNR CWD, you can find out a lot of that stuff. But the URL is down there as well. There's videos on how to quarter your deer, how to submit a sample for testing, how to cape your deer, and caping a deer means that you're removing the skin around the head so that you can take that to a taxidermist and get it mounted if you've got a really nice buck, or even a doe if you wanted to mount it. And you can look up how you can check your test results online, or look up taxidermists or meat processors in your area. There are deer feeding and attractant bans, and these are put in place in areas where there's CWD, specifically to try to reduce deer congregating in areas. Deer feeding is prohibited in areas where CWD was detected in farm deer. So you can have no deer feeding whatsoever. In other areas of the state, you're still allowed to feed deer if you're trying to do that, or if that's a priority for you. In some areas you cannot. In addition, there are some areas where you can't use attractants. So these are scents that hunters can use they'll put it on a piece of cloth or a felt wick, and they'll either drag them through the woods or they'll hang them from a tree, and then that's what they'll use to hopefully lure deer in. A lot of those scent attractants actually use physical real deer urine or doe estrus when does are going into breeding mode, and it's just not reliable. It congregates deer when you do stuff like that, and so we're trying to reduce them being close together, and B, We don't necessarily know where that doe urine or estrus is coming from, so there could be CWD in that stuff as well. So there's a lot of areas where those restrictions are in place. What does it mean for you as a hunter? The good news is that there's been no documented case of CWD infecting humans or cattle, but the CDC, the WHO, pretty much all health agencies that are around do not recommend eating an infected animal. You can take precautions. Keep hunting. You don't have to stop hunting. I still hunt in Wisconsin where there's CWD all over the place. Get your deer tested. You do have to change how you operate sometimes. Getting your deer tested. Where I hunt in Wisconsin, we butcher everything. It all goes straight into the freezer, and then we wait for our test results to come back. I have had to throw out an entire deer that I butchered by hand on my own. It's not a good feeling, but it's better than feeling like I'm feeding my family CWD meat. Don't mix deer, don't mix venison from different deer until you get all the test results back. So if you're grinding a lot of burger and you're like half a pound short, don't throw in that other deer. Keep them separate. That also goes for your tools that you're using while processing. Don't use tools that you process one deer with and then switch over to another deer. Where I hunt in Wisconsin, I have CWD tools, right? Like they're pieces of equipment that I know are only going to be in that area, and then I do not take them into non-CWD areas. So I try to keep that pretty strict. Avoid eating tissues that can have lots of prions, brain, spinal column. Most of us don't think about eating brains or spinal columns, but if you have a bone-in neck roast, there's spinal material in that bone-in neck roast. So we bone out all our meat in Wisconsin where I hunt. There's nothing attached to the bone. And it's just a different step to take, a different way to do it. There has been recent studies that have shown that if you can clean stainless steel tools like knives in a 30% bleach water solution, to be safe, I'm usually using a 50% bleach water solution, but it looks like 30% does help. And when I'm gutting, when I grew up hunting down in Georgia, we would saw through the pelvis, we would cut open the sternum. If you're in CWD areas, it's typically best practice to not do that. You don't want to cut through bone. You don't want to cut through that material because that could be where prions are hanging out. And the good news is that you don't need to. You can still gut a deer without cutting through the sternum or the pelvis. You just have to kind of switch up how you do it a little bit. In general, protect yourself while you're hunting. Be aware of ticks. Ticks are out there. Don't eat wild game or fowl that looks sick. Wear rubber gloves. Wash your hands. Thoroughly clean knives, equipments, and surfaces. Cook wild game, venison, and bear to a minimal internal temperature of 160 degrees. A lot of us like rare venison, but you open yourself up to risk, some moderate risk for parasites if that's where you're at. And then don't rely on freezing or curing stuff to kill parasites, because a lot of them can survive that stuff. And there's a whole list of stuff. There's a couple of websites down there that give you recommendations for that. There's a lot of other stuff that's out there, and we're running short on time, so I'm going to try to wrap this up pretty quickly. Liver flukes are normal. They're a parasite that live in the liver. A lot of people eat liver. I don't. I'm too much of a biologist because I know the liver is a filtering organ. I don't want to eat a filtering organ. That's just my take. If you want to eat it, that's your call, but make sure that liver looks good. If it's got a lot of cysts on it or it's malformed or discolored, I would leave it alone. There are flies that lay eggs in the nasal cavity. Dark lung tissue, especially if it's near the gunshot wound, that's usually trauma due to the shot, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Fibromas are these, they're basically giant warts, and that deer on the right is a really warty deer. Cut around them. They're not going to affect the meat, or they shouldn't affect the meat. Again, those lymph nodes, you don't want to be eating those. They're fine. They're just a little gland. They tend to be in the necks, the armpits, and the groin area. Just cut around them, toss them. And then, deer can be wounded from other stuff, fighting with other bucks, a bad shot from the year before. a lot of times you'll cut open a deer and there'll be an abscess where there's been an infection, but the deer's body has walled that off, and just cut around it and leave it alone. If it smells bad, if it looks bad, if it doesn't look like meat, don't use it. Just toss it out. And unfortunately, that was Kelsey's presentation. So I'm really sorry that timing happened the way it did, but that's where we're at. Real quick, I want to go over, Craig and I want to talk about ammunition considerations for hunting for food. Lead bullets are designed to open up and fragment, depending on the kind of lead bullet it is, depends on how much fragmentation there is. There was a study back in 2008 with lead bullets and that fragmentation and where that fragmentation went in the body. And depending on the type of ammunition they used, there were average travel distances of 11 inches with extremes of 14 to 18 inches. Now, a lot of people, when they hunt, they'd say, trim around the wound channel, maybe an inch. And so you want to get away all the trauma, the bloodshot meat that's in there, and whatever fragmentation may be in there, right in that direct wound channel. But what this study showed was that those lead fragments were traveling much farther through the body of the animal. And you can see in that X-ray, all those little bright flecks that are along the rib cage, those are all bullet fragments. Copper ammunition rarely fragments. When it does, it's in usually big giant pieces, like a quarter of the bullet will come off if it hits bone the right way. In addition, even if you were to ingest a little bit of copper, it's not the same as ingesting lead. There's no safe level of lead exposure. So it's not something that I want to feed my family. It's not something that I want to eat. In addition, all those fragments, especially even if they're in the guts and you're not taking it home to your table, there are scavengers out there that eat this stuff. Bald eagles, every year there's a spike in bald eagles going into animal rehab centers because they ate on gut piles that had lead in them. Craig, did you have anything to add to that? You're muted, buddy.
I said, nope, you got it all. I've been trying to answer a bunch of questions here. One question by TJ. It says, how many points does a buck need to be before you take the shot? I think we've done away with antler point restrictions, haven't we?
Yeah, there are no longer statewide antler point restrictions. So for a while, there was an area in the southeastern part of the state where a buck had to have, I believe it was 4 points on one side before you could legally harvest that animal. Those have been done away with now that CWD is spreading in that area. So we no longer have antler point restrictions. Those are a tool that are developed to help build big, healthy bucks. So those are no longer around.
With multiple seasons open, if there's any sort of priority adequate for different hunters where deer hunters are out. And I think it would be almost two different areas. But if you bump into a deer hunter, turn around and hunt back the way you came from and find another trail.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. And if you're out small game hunting, the biggest thing to be aware of, especially early season small game hunting, the overlap of those seasons, the nice thing about the deer firearm season is that it's later in November. Once people are in the deer woods, it's kind of a different mode. And they're going to be wearing blaze orange, so they'll be a little bit more visible. With squirrel hunting and small game hunting, I'd be much more concerned about archery hunters because you're shooting up into trees, and frequently they're sitting in tree stands and they're wearing all camo. So just, be aware, listen out. If you hear somebody yell out to you, just, back out, acknowledge them, say my bad, and do the right thing and back out. So that would be my biggest concern with small game hunting.
Three areas available to hunt.
Are there any lottery areas available to hunt?
So you'd have to find a
Right,
managed area or intensive harvest area.
You can still hunt those lottery areas, but you're going to be restricted to bucks only. So, you know, those, unless it's a special lottery for like a municipality or a city, those are also all done as well now. So, you know, those special hunts are pretty much in the books. So you're restricted to what's available to everybody.
So Trace was asking, can you bone out your deer in the feed? And if so, where would you hang your tag?
Right. So if you're hunting in a CWD area, there are carcass movement restrictions, and definitely look to see if there are movement restrictions in the area you're hunting, and that's all on that CWD page that we referenced. You can take long bones, so you can quarter the deer, and you can take out the back straps, and you can take out the tenderloins, and you can even cut out the neck meat and the rib meat, and you'll be fine. But you need to leave that head and spinal column and ribs intact behind. So you can take all that stuff with you. I would still go ahead, if I was hunting in that area, just to be quick about it, I would go ahead, I would shoot the deer, I would attach the tag right away before I moved it. I would drag it back to the car. I'd take it to one of the sample stations. I'd submit the head for sampling. I would quarter the deer out with the skin on. I would bone out the sirloin, the back straps. I'd bone out the tenderloins, and I would get all the neck meat that I could. And so my tag is still on that animal. It's probably on a leg at that point. And that's what I would do. So that's still going to be on there. The tag is still going to be there with the meat when you take it out. But that would be my suggestion.
Okay. There was a question, Nathan, on party hunting, use a cell phone or other electronic communication. We covered that last time. Once the animal has been shot, to inform the party the tag needs to be punched. So once the take is complete and the animal has your electronic communication device, you can't
Correct.
use it to say that would be illegal.
Yep.
I'd have to look that one
it's
up
going to
in the
depend
right
on the
book.
area and check. Yep, check that unit.
Got a question on last year. I got a kit to send the spleen in for testing. The spleen didn't fit in the bag to return it, so I didn't send it in. Are you going to do kit this year? And if so, you need the entire spleen. And that would have been a great Kelsey question.
Yeah, maybe if she gets back, we'll be able to answer that. I haven't heard about the spleen testing efforts this year, and I haven't seen anything. But if something comes up, it'll be on that hunting page, that hunting landing page, right at the top under news and notices. So just keep an eye out on that. Sean, the lymph testing, any visible signs of CWD? Craig answered it, no. Some can appear thin and emaciated. Some are the one that I got in Wisconsin was a healthy, hardy 10-point buck. And we butchered out 85 pounds of meat on him. And so he looked just fine. And it broke my heart to have to toss that away. How long does testing take? It depends. It depends on how many samples they're getting. It depends on that area. I would expect it within 2 to 3 weeks.
How do you dispose of a CWD deer?
I would, so my understanding, and if Kelsey comes back, my understanding is that the DNR, if they get a positive back, they're going to try to recover that animal from you.
Okay.
Because they have a digester that they're going to want to put that in. In Wisconsin, where I was at, the recommendation that I got was to just put it in the municipal trash. But this is a different state. There are different rules. I would not do that. I would wait until the DNR got a hold of me, because the DNR is going to know it's positive before you do.
Okay. Any advice to butcher a deer for fitting a sedan?
Quarter it out, take those legs off, the front, and we'll get into this in a later webinar. Take the front and the back legs off. I would take everything below the hock joint, so from the hoof, the really skinny part, up to there's a knobby bit, and then it gets more meaty. Take everything below that joint off. Just take the leg itself, the meaty bits on the leg. Take those legs off. Take off the back straps that run down the spine on either side of the spine. Take out the tenderloins. I will bone out the neck meat and the rib meat, and you're pretty much good to go. You could fit it into a smart car. It's not going to take up that much room.
Next question. Taking your deer to a butcher shop to be processed, is this an option?
It's totally an option. That's a great point and a great segue. This year, processors are already slammed. I'm hearing of some processors that are already slammed with domestic livestock, so cows, pigs, sheep. They're already booked out to like January, a couple of them. So it's going to be tough this fall. Processors are already really busy with stuff. So yes, you can take it. There are a couple of considerations to think of when you're taking your deer to a processor. One of the reasons why I butcher my own meat is that I don't want my deer mingling with other deer. So if Craig and I took our mutually exclusive deer to a processor, there's no guarantees that I won't get some of Craig's deer and he won't get some of mine. So I don't know if Craig's using lead. Craig doesn't know if I'm using lead. I don't know if Craig's testing his deer for CWD. Craig doesn't know if I'm testing my deer for CWD. So I like to keep all that stuff self-contained. I'm paranoid, and I like to know what's in my meat. And so the best way for me to do that is to process it myself. It's not that hard. We're going to get into it later in this webinar series. If you can debone a chicken, you can debone a deer. So it's just bigger and takes a little longer.
Question. Use of book in CWD areas, and I was trying to find a quick.
Yeah, so I would look up, I would look up CWD on the website, and I'm not sure Kelsey had the pages on there. Yeah, so I would just look it up on the CWD website online. So just MN DNR CWD, and you should come up with it. Deer and attractants, page 77.
Okay.
Page 77. There's a question in here about using shotgun slugs. You can no special considerations. The slugs will fragment less as a lead projectile than a bullet, because they're typically bigger and they're moving slower. They still will fragment. The good news is that there are copper or non-lead alternatives for shotgun slugs as well. And a few years ago, copper or non-lead ammunition was twice as much as lead ammo. These days, there are a lot more people making it. There are a lot more options. If you're a savvy online shopper, you can find this stuff for just about what lead costs you. And there's still a place for lead. I still use a lot of lead at the range. I would recommend using lead at a range to get comfortable with what you're using. A lot of the ranges, that lead is reclaimed and recycled and sold. So, it's not just persisting in the landscape. But for hunting, my personal choice, I hunt non-lead because I don't want to eat it.
So Rachel asked about reference what makes a legal doe. So you could shoot an antlerless deer that appeared to be doe, and it's really a young buck, and that would still go on your antlerless tag.
Yep.
Copper bullets are better than soft points. Let you take that one.
The copper bullets still have to expand. So that picture that we had of the copper bullet, it's still an expanding, if you look down in that bottom left, that's still an expanding bullet. So it's, Is it better? They're different. They're still gonna they're still gonna give you a very ethical, humane kill. None of the deer that I've shot with copper have ever gone very far. I think the farthest has gone maybe 50, 60 yards. And most of them just drop right where they're at. So it's when you're talking bullets and ammunition, it's hard to say one's better than the other. They're different. Copper puts them down just as effectively as lead does. It just does it in a little bit different way. You have any comments on that, Craig?
Nope. You can go with a little bit lighter bullet in copper because they hold together so much better. If you're shooting 180 grain 30-06, you can step down to a 150 or 165 and still get the knockdown you were looking for. There's quite a few questions left, James.
Okay. Yeah, and we're past 1 o'clock. We'll try to get through as many of these questions as we can. If you've got to pop off, thank you for joining us. I'm really sorry Kelsey got called away right when she was starting her talk. She had 2 elk come in right at the same time, so that kind of sucks. But it's a busy time of year. Folks are out hunting. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to stay online. We're going to keep answering these questions. We're going to try to get through what we can. But if you got to take off, we're going to be posting these. Our IT guy gets back tomorrow, so hopefully we can get the videos up from last week and this week up by the end of the week this week. So that is our goal. Thank you for being patient about that, and we'll be sending out emails when those go up. So all right, back to the questions.
CWD meat used for dog feed?
I would not do it. There's no evidence that it's going to jump that species barrier, but it's not a risk I'm comfortable with. I don't want to be patient zero. I don't want my dog to be patient zero. We can't say that it's not going to happen. All we can say is that it hasn't happened yet.
The antlerless permits have not come out yet. Tony, it'll be a little while yet, but
Azalea, we do have specific dumpsters for disposal for CWD in those areas, so the question that I was referring to earlier, if you bone out your animal, if you transport it home and you're no longer in that CWD area, how do you dispose of it? And I would wait until the DNR reaches out to you and talk to them about it. So, but there are dumpsters in the CWD area. Do your boning out there, register your animal, submit it for testing, and then head on home.
And finally, Martin, there are processors that will guarantee you that you get your deer back.
Some of them do. I'm just not I just don't trust people, Martin. That's just my paranoia.
That service.
What's that, Craig? Craig, you're breaking up on me. What'd you say? That's all right.
Yeah. All right. That was the last one.
So,
that was the last question.
Okay. Let me see. I'm just going to take a peek in the chat. Is bonus license required hunting archery in an unlimited archery area? Is it required, Farouk? No, you can just hunt on your main license, but you're restricted to one animal on that main license. The nice thing about hunting in an unlimited antlerless is that you can get multiple bonus permits, and then you keep that main license if you're ever going to go into an area that requires that doesn't have bonus permits eligible for that area. So my personal philosophy is if I'm hunting in a deer permit area that allows bonus permits, I'm going to use my bonus permits first, because that still lets me hunt in an area where maybe those aren't eligible in another part of the state. Are meat processors held to state standard to prevent processing meat with CWD? I can't answer that question, Corey. I don't think there's a cleaning standard that's out there. I haven't heard of one informally, but I'm not the voice of authority on that. I know there are some meat processors who will not take deer from CWD areas specifically to try to encourage the confidence that their customers are not going to be exposed to it. And I think, let me see, and I think that gets to all the questions. So thank you, everybody. We're about 10 minutes over. Again, I'm really sorry Kelsey got called away right at the worst moment, but those are some of the realities we deal with. You know, when elk call, you got to go answer them. So thanks so much for taking part. We're going to be back on Thursday at noon. We're going to be talking gear and equipment, what you need, what you don't. And yeah, so let's keep the conversations going. Thanks so much for tuning in. Happy first day of fall. Holy moly, first day of fall. It's here. So yeah, have a good one. Be safe if you're out in the woods. Good luck, good skill, and have a blast. Bye, everybody.